Good day, everyone. I am Jane Danica M. Cabalse, taking up Bachelor of Elementary Education first year in Bernardo College. Now, I'm going to discuss the primary and secondary sources of the three topics, which is the Marcos Declaration of Martial Law, EDSA People Power, and President Joseph Estrada's impeachment. Now, I am going to discuss the primary sources of Marcos Declaration of Martial Law. First primary source of Marcos Declaration of Martial Law is the President Marcos press conference on the state of martial law. It is a video on YouTube which shows President Marcos press conference on the state of martial law. It is said as a primary source because from the video itself, President Marcos is home speaking at the conference, and by that, the information came and started from him. Second primary source of Marcos Declaration of Martial Law is the newspaper with an headline FN Declares Martial Law made by Sunday Express. It is said as the primary source of Marcos Declaration of Martial Law as the headline of the September 24, 1972 issue of the Sunday Express, which was the Sunday edition of Philippine Daily Express. The Daily Express was the only newspaper allowed to circulate upon the time of declaration of martial law. The third primary source of Marcos Declaration of Martial Law is the diary of President Ferdinand Marcos. That picture is excerpt from the diary of Ferdinand A. Marcos on September 22, 1972 from the Philippine Diary Project. It is said as one of the primary source of martial law declaration because the information was at Ferdinand Marcos' diary wherein he wrote it in a handwritten way. Marcos and his diary entry for September 22, 1972, timestamp 9:55 p.m., wrote Secretary Juan Ponce Enrile was ambushed near Wakwak at about 8 p.m. tonight. It was a good thing he was riding in a security car as a protective measure. This makes the martial law proclamation a necessity. His diary entry for September 25, 1972 mentions condition after 2 days of martial law. Also indicating martial law in reality is dated to September 23, 1972. Now, let's discuss the secondary sources of Marcos Declaration of Martial Law. First secondary source of Marcos Declaration of Martial Law is The Kingmaker. The Kingmaker by Lorraine Greenfield is a documentary about Marcos' dictatorship that shows perspective from different people, the Marcoses, Marcos apologists, and the anti-Marcoses. I believe that originally the main purpose of this documentary was to show what happened during the martial law and how different the Marcoses and those who suffered from martial law perspective are, and also to put emphasis on the Marcos family's effort to preserve their status and reclaim power and influence. And in the process of making this documentary, they inevitably exposed the truth from their hunger for power and money, their overly lavish lifestyle, and their family's selfish, narcissistic attempt and way of living that's so much different from how good history books portray them to be, because no matter how much they try, the truth will always prevail. It is written to educate the people without being one-sided or biased. It is said as a secondary source wherein Lauren Greenfield made this documentary with a purpose to show the happenings during martial law and how Marcos managed the entire Philippines during the period of martial law. Second secondary source of Marcos' Declaration of Martial Law is from The Mail, when Marcos announced martial law proclamation 48 years ago by Severino Samonte. It is said as a secondary source of Marcos' Declaration of Martial Law because the information came from another author, whom Severino Samonte, and his information bases on his opinion only. The third secondary source of Marcos' Declaration of Martial Law is the reaction paper about Batas Militar by Romelin Angadol. It is said as the secondary source because the information only bases on her reaction and learnings about the film entitled Batas Militar she watched. Now, let's move on to EDSA People Power primary sources and secondary sources. First, let's discuss the primary sources. This is a primary source because from that document itself, we can see that so many Filipinos walks to march along Epifanio de los Santos Avenue or EDSA with a purpose to end out the dictatorship of President Ferdinand Marcos and begin a new era marked by true freedom and democracy. The second primary source is Jose T. Almonte's book, My Part in the 1986 People Power Revolution. It is a primary source because Jose T. Almonte wrote his book entitled My Part, primarily focused on his experiences and may have overlooked other EDSA revolution events that he was not present for. The third primary source is Monina Alaris Mercado's book, People Power. It is said as a primary source because this is an oral and visual history of people's power in the Philippines Revolution of 1986. It is an oral history told by the people who witnessed and made the event. It is also a visual history told through photographs, 247 photos. It was a revolution without precedent. Men, women, and children, armed only with crucifixes, images of the Blessed Virgin, songs, and rosaries to signify their prayers, made themselves into human barricade. Made invulnerable by their vulnerability, they faced up to armed marines and stopped tanks. Thus, the people disarmed the Marcos forces. People's power had regained democracy. The book captures history as it was made out of the spontaneous courage which Filipino will never forget and about which the world will always wonder. Then now, let's discuss the secondary sources of EDSA People Power. First secondary source of EDSA People Power is the EDSA On My Mind. It is said as a secondary source because it is a film review remembering the 1986 People Power Revolution. Ateneo de Manila University holds an online forum Tuesday, February 22 entitled EDSA On My Mind, remembering the 1986 People Power Revolution to give insights to younger generation about the uprising. The forum features the following speakers: Pablo Virgilio Ambo David. Second secondary source of EDSA People Power is from TV Patrol with a headline Knowledge about EDSA People Power Revolution. This is said as the secondary source wherein Mr. Kim Atienza sharing kaunting kaalaman or knowledge about the throwback happenings of EDSA People Power Revolution. The third secondary source of EDSA People Power is from 24 Oras, Balik-tanaw sa 1986 People Power Revolution na nagpabagsak sa rehimeng Marcos. This is a secondary source because, according to 24 Oras, the basis of the information they are reporting came from the primary sources, and the purpose of this is to remember the happenings during EDSA People Power to make people know what happened in the time of EDSA People Power Revolution. Now, let's discuss the primary and secondary sources of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment. Now, let's discuss the primary sources of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment. First primary source of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment is from Philippines. Estrada impeachment trial begins. It is a primary source. According to AP Archive, prosecutors have begun the impeachment trial of Philippines President Joseph Estrada. In that video, we can see that the information came from the Senate wherein the prosecutors, all opposition congressmen, turned portraying Estrada as a man who broke the public trust. From a soundbite of Representative Feliciano Belmonte, prosecution attorney, it is painful because we proved to the judges in these proceedings that the faith and the trust we have bestowed on our president had been abused. It is a grave duty, grave because we are asking the judges that Joseph Ejercito Estrada, who elected as president, be removed from the presidency at once. Also, a soundbite of Sergio Apostol prosecution attorney Joseph Ejercito Estrada has violated all previously mentioned by congressmen. He has violated the law not once, not twice, but regularly, like clockwork. Estrada faces 4 charges: bravery, corruption, violating the Constitution, and betraying the public trust. The second primary source of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment is from Philippines Estrada Impeachment Trial, The Witness. It is a primary source of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment because, based on the YouTube video, a witness in the impeachment trial of President Joseph Estrada testified on Thursday that a presidential aide ordered her to start 2 shell companies that prosecutors say Estrada used to hide bribe money. From the video, a soundbite of Joseph Estrada, Philippine President, I believe that after all of this, truth will prevail. Now, I am calling on all of the people who are causing trouble to focus on things that can help our country. We should listen to the voice of all our people, not just a rich few in Makati. The third primary source of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment is from Philippines President Estrada Impeachment Trial Latest. It is said as a primary source wherein the impeachment trial has been on national televisions daily with damaging testimony linking Estrada with secret bank accounts and trying to influence investigation of friendly businessmen. From a soundbite of Representative Feliciano Belmonte, outgoing prosecutor, and from yesterday's vote on the second equitable PCI Bank envelope, it is clear to us that the judgment of the impeachment court will not be reached on the basis of truth that the people seek but from the partisan vote of majority of the senators judges. A soundbite of Senator Raul Roco impeachment judge, we notice that there are no people in the prosecutor's arm as seats. We respectfully move to adjourn until this matter is settled and we can proceed. From an upsound of Chief Justice Hilario David, presiding officer of impeachment's hearing, there being none, the motion as amended is approved. Now, let's discuss the secondary sources of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment. The first secondary source of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment is the impeachment of Estrada, Day of Political Tumult in Manila by Thomas Fuller, International Herald Tribune. It is said as a secondary source because it is an article by Thomas Fuller, International Herald Tribune, stating the impeachment of President Joseph Estrada and prospecting of being the first Philippine president ever removed from office. The second secondary source of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment is impeachment of President Joseph Estrada by Pradis Vina. It is said as a secondary source because the information based on the original source that Pradis Vina researched for. The third secondary source of President Joseph Estrada's impeachment is The Fall of Joseph Estrada 2000 by Journeyman. This is said as a secondary source because according to Journeyman TV, Heroes and Gangster 2000, the former movie star President of the Philippines is hoping for a happy ending to the greatest scandal yet to rock his presidency, but evidence is mounting that the champion of the poor stole from his own people. That was the primary and secondary sources of the 3 topics, which is Marcos' declaration of martial law, EDSA people power, and President Joseph Estrada's impeachment. Thank you for listening. God bless.